In this video, I'm going to be building the best $1,200 gaming PC you can put together in 2022. With GPU prices falling and some great new CPUs out on the market, builds at this price point have got so much better recently. I'll be covering off all the component choices, showing you how to assemble the build step by step before testing out the performance of this really powerful 1080 and 1440p system later on. Let's do this. The new NZXT function mechanical keyboards bring NZXT into the peripheral market with a bang. With full-size TKL and mini TKL variants available, per-key RGB backlighting and Gateron mechanical switches, they're an impressive lineup. Alongside swappable keycaps, you also get hot swap key switches. Amazing to see for you keyboard nerds out there. Check out the black or white colorways available now at the links in the description below. To kick things off, we're going to install as many components as possible into the motherboard. And the choice I've gone for is the Gigabyte B660DS3H. Now this is a perfect motherboard for a more budget value oriented build like this one, but still provides plenty of features that you'd expect when spending over $1,000 on a PC build. These features include the addition of 10 gigabit USB on the rear panel, Type A and Type C, big winner there, Wi-Fi 6 technology to make sure you can not only connect to your Wi-Fi, but also get support for 2.4 and 5 GHz networks. On the front here, you'll also find PCIe Generation 4 for super fast NVMe SSDs, giving you great speed options, as well as dual channel memory support, and memory and CPU overclocking. The feature list really is very long for a board that actually looks quite bare. Apart from, of course, all of those PCIe lanes. I wonder why Gigabyte have opted to do that on this board. Genuinely no idea. It's a great board either way though, even if it is a little bit mining centered with all of those expansion slots. I'm going to be installing our CPU choice into the motherboard, and this right here is the Intel Core i5-12400F. The new 12th gen Intel chips are phenomenal when it comes to performance, and the 12400F is Intel's entry-level i5. It's not going to bottleneck our 3060 Ti, and lacks any included graphics, saving us money as we'll be using our dedicated GPU of course. Locate your golden triangle on the CPU itself. You can see here, ours is just in this corner, nice and small, and we're going to match this triangle up to the bottom left-hand corner of our CPU socket. Pull up the retention arm a little bit like so, and the socket cover will unfold accordingly. Drop into place your shiny 12th gen Intel chip, pop your cover back down, and the black plastic cover will pop right off. Add the retention arm back into place, and the cooler. No, that's not yet. The CPU is installed. We'll be moving onto the cooler a little bit later. But first, there's two more components to go, and they are our RAM and our SSD. In terms of the RAM or the memory, I've gone for this Geil Orion RGB kit. Now this memory is actually really good. It's dual channel, giving us 2 RAM DIMMs as well. It's got RGB on the top and comes in either a shiny metallic red or a more sublime grey colourway. I've gone for the more grey stealthy option for this build, though the integration of RGB will light up, look fantastic, and give your build a nice bit of customization. Lots of builds nowadays go towards a neutral black aesthetic, and then you can choose your overall build accent with RGB. And that's the approach we've gone for too. We're going to install the memory into the grey RAM DIMMs, so pull back the clips on these slots. This gives us 2 RAM DIMM slots free as well for future upgrades if you wanted to pop in 32 gigs later on. Clip it in nice and slowly like so, line the notch on the DIMM with the notch on the DIMM slot, and apply a bit of pressure to each side. Once we've done that, we can then move on to the storage. Now, storage is a hugely personal choice for most people. And in this build, I've picked up the XPG Spectrix S40G. I think I'm going to combine this 500GB drive with a hard drive for more mass storage, but if you've got more money to spend and want all your storage to be super speedy, pick up a 1 or 2 terabyte SSD. The choice really is yours, and you can find a full review write-up of this drive over on GeekaWhat.com, linked in the description below. It also includes speed tests if you're wondering just how snappy this XPG add-on is. We're going to be installing the drive into this top M.2 slot, which is pretty easy. Take yourself a small screwdriver, unscrew the screw that's pre-installed on the standoff helpfully marked 80, 80 being the length of our drive in millimeters. Fun fact for you there. Slide the drive in at sort of a 45-degree angle with the top of the drive pointing upwards, and then lay it flat. It's going to sit nice and easily on that standoff and secure into place with this screw. Don't worry that the drive feels like it wants to pop out of the standoff. Once that screw's in place, it's not going to go anywhere. Oh, and did I mention this SSD has RGB? Because of course it does. Once we've done that, we can then move on to the CPU cooler. The final component to focus on before we go ahead and look at the case for this build and start moving our motherboard into the chassis. If we move the motherboard to one side, we can take a closer look at the CoolerMaster MA612 Stealth. Now, when it comes to a system like this, picking a cooler is quite tricky. Originally, I was going to go for the more budget-oriented CoolerMaster Hyper 212 Evo. And to be honest with you, it would still be a great choice. But if one thing it is, it's a bit boring. And this MA612 Stealth is definitely not. With a pair of included fans on a slightly beefy centre heatsink, you're going to get plenty of airflow, and you're also going to get some really nice aesthetics. It's going to add, once again, more RGB to the case, which I'm personally a big fan of, and more importantly, keep our 12400F nice and cool without making a load of noise. Inside the box, you'll then find this box of mounting hardware, which we'll be using to install it onto the motherboard. Everything from an RGB and fan splitter to an RGB controller, where you can simply press a button and cycle through the modes, or plug up your cooler to your motherboard to control it in Gigabyte software, right through to a backplate, some included mounting brackets, and a tube of thermal paste. Now, this is the point of the build where you've got to let your pride go truly out the window and consult the manual for once. That's because actually installing a cooler is quite tricky, and having some nice diagrams are going to make life a lot easier. If you install the cooler wrong, you can get a world of problems. So consult the manual first and then install the cooler. But of course, I'll be talking you through the installation process step by step. So follow along if you're also building this system with me at home. Take your backplate and face it face down so the scaffolding is actually on your table and you can see the word Intel. Then grab these silver posts and these black plastic stoppers. We're going to pop each of the silver posts through the backplate and then add these black plastic stoppers on top. What that's going to do is leave our silver screw poking through the rear of the backplate, showing on the scaffolding side. Repeat this for all four corners and then we can pop the backplate through the rear of the motherboard. The next step is to then take these posts with a sort of post at the bottom and a male screw thread at the top and to actually screw these over each of the four silver posts now poking through the motherboard. So 4 posts, 1 on each corner. Fasten these down corner by corner in a cross pattern bit by bit and then add these metal brackets on top, securing them down with the included thumb screws. Once that's done, the framework to actually add our cooler in is complete and we can drop the cooler itself on. Not forgetting, of course, a dab of the included thermal paste. We'll be wiring up the fans and all that jazz later, so don't worry about that for now. And I think what I'm actually going to do is unclip the fans from the cooler at this stage to make screwing in the motherboard, which is what's coming next, a bit easier. And with the cooler in the bag, we can then move on to the case. That was actually quite heavy. This right here is CoolerMaster's brand new Masterbox 500. So new that I had to check it was actually out before filming this video. And good news, it is. This is one of their more budget-oriented ATX cases that combines the best of non-mesh with the best of mesh. It fits full-size ATX motherboards, which we need for our Gigabyte DS3H gaming extravaganza. This is a really nice chassis though. CoolerMaster have brought some nice stuff to the market recently. What you're going to want to do is lay the case down flat on a table, as that will make the next stage of the build process, installing the board, much easier. Take off as many side panels as you can too. There we go, that just pulls off from the top. And we're also going to flip it over to the back to take off the rear panel as well, which this time round does have captive thumb screws. Much better. You're then going to want to grab your motherboard and locate each of the holes through the board. There's 3 at the top on this board, a further 3 across the middle, and 3 down the bottom. These are our standoff holes and we'll be using these to install the motherboard into place. Before going all gung-ho and whacking the motherboard into your case, you need to make sure those 9 screw holes are reciprocated. I think with this being a standard ATX case, we should be in luck. 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, 3 across the bottom. Fantastic. If these are in the wrong places, then feel free to move them about with a pair of pliers. It's an important step and one you don't want to forget. Talking of forgetting and steps, the rear I/O shield. Because this motherboard is on the slightly more affordable end of the spectrum, you've got to pop this in yourself. Expensive boards come with it built in, which is a nice feature. Clip it in corner by corner, and then you can finally go ahead and actually pop the motherboard into place. The ports are, of course, going to go through that rear I/O shield, and the whole board is going to line up over those 9 standoff holes. The middle one is raised, keeping the motherboard roughly in place while we screw it down with 9 of the included screws. Nice and simple. And we can finish things off by whacking the fans back on the cooler too, for a full house of motherboard installation. Once that's in, we can finally move on to the GPU, the graphics card, the component I know you've all been waiting for. This is Gigabyte's RTX 3060Ti, and fun fact, there's lots of fun facts in this video, it's my favourite 3060 Ti design ever. That's right, out of all of the say 20, 30 different 3060 Ti SKUs, this ranks as my favourite. It's got a nice 2-fan cooler, looks quite basic so far, but an absolutely incredible value price point. This card basically sits around the reference 3060 Ti design in MSRP, but with a cooler that provides extra performance, higher clock speeds, and builds on Nvidia's fantastic Ampere architecture. The only concern I have got is that the card is quite compact, meaning it might look a little bit lost in our case today. I think it'll be okay though, and it gives us all the performance we could possibly want. Perfect for 1440p gaming in the latest titles, or super high frame rate gaming at 1080p. Now, I think we need to remove a couple of PCI lanes from the back of the case. At a quick glance, it's the second and third metal covers. We're going to take these off, slide the GPU into place, and use the same screws to secure it back down. And then finally, to wrap things up, we can give the GPU, and for that fact, the rest of our components, power. And to do that, I've selected the Corsair CX650F. One of the best value modular power supplies around right now. With an 80+ certification, 650 watts of output, and an interface that allows you to only plug in the cables you need, we're on to a winner. Oh, and it's got RGB, because of course it has. You can control the RGB through the button on the rear or through Corsair iQ. This is a great power supply though. It's got enough wattage for what we're looking to do in this build. If you go any higher end on the GPU, you will want to step up to a 750 watt power supply. To check your graphics card's power supply requirements very carefully, as it can cause you problems later on. Pop in your CPU, motherboard and GPU power connectors. We're also going to add in a SATA power cable for the RGB hub, and then screw this into the rear of the case. Plug up the other end of these cables to the CPU power connection on the motherboard power cable on the motherboard, your 6+2 pin GPU power connection, and SATA power cable on the rear panel. But we're not quite done with cables just yet. Before wrapping things up, we also need to plug up the front panel connections, aka the ports and buttons on the top of the case. Let's work from left to right. On the top, starting with USB 3. This is the largest connection of the bunch, and it's notched, meaning it'll only go in one way round. We've then also got our power and reset switches, otherwise known as our JFP1. These are the fiddly pins, and we'll pop a diagram on your screen now to make things a bit easier. Finally, we've also got the HD audio headphone mic combo jack port. We're going to pop this to the bottom left of the motherboard into our HD audio slot. Nice and simple, nice and easy, and that's all of our front panel cables done. Once we've done that, the build's basically finished, and I think it looks really nice. To see just how good it looks though, we're going to plug it up to some power and jump into an epic glam montage, before finally taking a look at performance to round things off. I'll see you in a second, but first, roll that montage. Now that we've seen just how good this system looks and it's all powered up, it's time to make sure the benchmark numbers match up in an appropriate fashion. Is this build providing the same levels of performance as what you'd expect from its aesthetics? The short answer, yes it is. On your screen now is a summary of all the results, all the games, everything we tested out, so you guys can have a quick look and find your favourite game and see whether the frame rate matches up. We haven't got time to jump into all of them, but we will be diving into about 8 or 9 in more detail, so stick with us. And we're going to start things off by looking at GTA 5. It's an oldie but a goldie, a classic benchmark test. At 1440p high settings, we managed to achieve over 150 FPS, closer to 160 frames in fact. The game looked great here at 1440p too, a resolution we think this system is really well suited to for a number of reasons that will become clear as we go through the titles. Next up is Battlefield 2042. Here at 1440p high settings once again with DLSS enabled, we pulled in just shy of 120 frames per second. 96 and 73 for the 90 and 99th percentile results gave us some phenomenal results that we were personally really pleased with. It's a similar story in COD's Vanguard, where at 1440p high settings once again, we got 112 FPS on average. All of our frame rate data was gathered with both NVIDIA FrameView and MSI Afterburner's RivaTuner to ensure maximum fairness. Forza Horizon 5 is next up on the list today, and here we used 1440p, the Ultra Settings preset, and the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode. You can copy these settings on your current build, run the benchmark, and see how it compares if you're considering upgrading. Here we pulled in 92 frames per second on average, very impressive indeed, with 88 and 80 for the 90 and 99th percentile results, showing those all-important consistent frame rates. Moving on to Halo Infinite next up, at 1440p high settings, we managed to achieve 110 FPS on average. 95 and 78 for the 90 and 99th percentile results rounded off a really great suite of results in Halo Infinite, where the game looked great, buttery smooth, all that good stuff. Everything you'd expect from a title like Halo, this was delivered with our 3060 Ti. Looking at Apex Legends next up, here we tested at 1440p high settings. This time round we managed to achieve 142 frames per second on average, with solid 90 and 99th percentile results too. The game visually once again looked really great, no lag, no stuttering, no screen tearing, making this system perfect for some of those esports titles. Talking of esports titles, Valorant. Here we tested at 1440p high settings, and this time managed to achieve 410 frames per second on average. Wow. This was complemented with some really solid 90 and 99th percentile results too, which is great to see. To round things off, we also tested out Fortnite and COD's Warzone. Let's start with Fortnite first at 1080p competitive settings. Here we achieved 243 frames per second on average. Wow, with 219 and 179 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. This is a perfect build for playing games like Fortnite and getting some great frame rates and actually a visual fidelity that looks quite nice. Finally, to wrap things up, we tested out a bit of Warzone. 1080p high settings, we achieved 111 frames per second on average. This was tested in the multiplayer battle royale to get the most replicatable, accurate results for you guys. Game visually looked great, as I say, really impressed with not only Warzone, but all the titles we tested out. And that wraps it up for our benchmarks today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.